The fight to go to school. 75 years ago, Sylvia Mendez became a key figure in a battle for equal education for Mexican American students. Her community's victory would pave the way for the end of racially segregated schools across the country. I am TB Wahid, Black Living Room Talk, and I am reading The Fight to Go to School by Bryan Brown. As you listen to this, please think about, how did discrimination affect Sylvia Mendez? How did her community fight for changes? The story kind of reminds me of Ruby Bridges. Sylvia Mendez could not have been happier. It was September 1944, and the 8-year-old was about to register for 3rd grade at a new school in Westminster, California. It reminds me of Ruby Bridges because Ruby Bridges was an African American female, and she was around about the same age, about 6 or 7 years old, and she was taunted and had to have police escorts to go to school, and she wound up being taught by one lady, one Caucasian female that had some sympathy and empathy for her and decided to go ahead and stay and teach her while all the other kids' parents had took them out of the school. So let's see how these two stories are similar. Just a few months before Sylvia, her parents, and her younger brothers had moved to the town to run a local farm. Now her aunt Soledad, who also lived on the farm with her husband and daughters, was taking all the kids to the Westminster main school for the first time. My mother had bought us all new clothes. We were so excited to go to school, Mendez recalls today. The children never expected their visit to help set in motion a series of events that would change education in America forever. The official they met said the school would accept Aunt Soledad's daughters, who were light-skinned, but Sylvia and her brothers, who had dark skin, hair, and eyes, would have to go to the town's Mexican school, a few blocks away. Furious, Aunt Soledad marched the kids home, refusing to enroll any of them. Sylvia's parents, Gonzalo and Felicitas, were also outraged. They were hard-working American citizens. The Mendezes were determined to fight back and would eventually join with other families to do so in court. Their lawsuit, Mendez versus Westminster School District, would ultimately lead to the end of school segregation in California. It would also help pave the way for an even bigger victory, the outlawing of segregation in public schools throughout the United States. Facing discrimination. In the 1940s, Orange County, California, where the Mendez family lived, was one of the nation's top producers of fruits and vegetables. Most of the workers picking that produce were Mexican American citizens or migrants from Mexico. The work was hard and paid poorly, but few other jobs were open to people of Mexican heritage then. In fact, in much of the country, particularly the Southwest, they faced constant discrimination. They were prevented from living in areas with sewers or paved streets. Stores and restaurants posted signs such as "No dogs" or "Mexicans" to keep them out. And Mexican American kids were forced to attend inferior schools separate from their white peers. Sylvia saw the differences firsthand. Every day, the school bus would drop her and her brothers off in front of the Westminster main school. The big, clean building had a beautifully kept grass yard, palm trees in front, and a playground with swings, a seesaw, and more. But Sylvia and her brothers had to walk right past it, down the street to Hoover Elementary. The overcrowded school for Mexican American students was little more than a couple of wooden shacks. At recess, students played on a dirt lot, swatting away flies from the cow pasture next door. Worse, Sylvia knew that the education students received there was poor. The school books were all handed down, so they'd be torn, she says. Rather than being taught subjects like science and math, the children were trained to become farmhands and maids. The white officials who oversaw Hoover Elementary expected the school's students to grow up to provide cheap labor. But people like the Mendezes envisioned a different future for their kids. Change was coming. Building a lawsuit. By the mid-1940s, Mexican Americans were already fighting for equal rights throughout the Southwest. Groups of parents in Texas, Arizona, and California had successfully sued their school districts, forcing them to integrate. Still, school segregation was practiced almost everywhere else. Many Mexican American families were determined to right that wrong, however. In Orange County, where Sylvia lived, parents and community groups were already appearing before school boards to demand integration, but they were largely getting nowhere. Finally, a group that Sylvia's father was part of hired a lawyer to challenge school segregation in court. The lawyer, David Marcus, had represented other Mexican American clients before. To win, he said, several families should join together in a class action lawsuit. Sylvia's father was one of several community members who drove around Orange County with Marcus looking for families to sign on. Meanwhile, Sylvia's mother took over running the farm and helped get parents to sign a petition against their school board. In the end, 5 families from 4 Orange County school districts came together for the lawsuit. In March 1945, it was filed on behalf of the families as Mendez vs. Westminster School District. The plaintiffs in the suit argued that forcing their children to attend separate schools denied them equal protection under the law, a right guaranteed by the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Proving discrimination. The trial began on July 5th. Marcus called the parents to the witness stand to explain how they had tried to enroll their children in their neighborhood schools, but had been denied. For their part, school officials claimed that the Mexican American students had been placed in separate schools because they didn't speak English well and would have held back the other learners. But Marcus called 2 students to the stand to prove that claim false. Not only did they, like many of their classmates, speak English fluently, officials had never even tested them. All in all, members of 13 different families testified about the discrimination they had faced. When Sylvia's mother, Felicitas, took the stand, she explained, "We always tell our children they are Americans. They shouldn't be segregated." Through skillful questioning, Marcus got school officials to show that they believed people of Mexican heritage were inferior to white people. One superintendent admitted that he thought Mexicans were far less intelligent and that they should be segregated in society. Importantly, Marcus also called experts to the stand to show that separating children based on their ethnicity was damaging to them. Segregation by its very nature is a constant reminder of inferiority, of not being wanted, one longtime educator said in her testimony. The judge's decision. On February 18, 1946, the judge who had heard the case issued a decision. By segregating Mexican American children, he said the school districts had violated the students' 14th Amendment rights to equal protection of the law. The meaning of the judge's words was clear. Separate schools can never be equal schools. But the fight wasn't over. The Orange County schools appealed the judge's decision to a higher court. In April 1947, that court upheld the Mendez victory. The case prompted California Governor Earl Warren to sign a bill banning racial segregation in California schools just 2 months later. From there, the case would trigger bolder demands for racial equality, says historian David James Gonzalez of Brigham Young University in Utah. He is an expert on the Mexican American struggle for civil rights. The whole legal basis for segregating people by race was undermined by Mendez, he explains. Crucially, the case helped pave the way for the landmark case Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, and the 1954 ruling on it by the United States Supreme Court, which banned segregation in all American schools. What they fought for. After the ruling, Sylvia and her brothers were finally able to enroll in the Westminster Main School. The coursework was more rigorous there, and Sylvia enjoyed learning, alongside classmates of all races, many of whom became her friends. She rose to the challenges her lessons presented, then pushed on through high school and college and had a long-term career as a registered nurse. Now, 85 years old, in recent years, Sylvia has dedicated herself to sharing what her community accomplished some 75 years ago. As she travels the country speaking to students about the legacy of the Mendez case, she has one central message. Education is critical. The American dream is possible, no matter the color of your skin or where you come from, she says. But you have to work hard. And like her parents and the many Mexican American families who fought for equality, you must persevere. In 2011, Sylvia Mendez received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama. Defeating separate but equal. In 1951, a black man named Oliver Brown sued the school board of Topeka, Kansas. The reason? His daughter, Linda, had been denied entrance to their neighborhood school, which was all white. In time, a dozen other black families joined the lawsuit. The case, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, eventually reached the U.S. Supreme Court. The civil rights lawyers who headed the family's legal team, including Thurgood Marshall, who later became the first black Supreme Court justice, used arguments made in Mendez v. Westminster as a model. Separating black students denied them their 14th Amendment rights, the lawyers argued. In 1954, the justices of the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 for the families. The practice of separate but equal was unlawful. The court's opinion said segregated schools are inherently unequal. In the end, that Supreme Court decision made racial segregation in schools illegal throughout the U.S. So that was a good story. And in the end, 5 families joined that lawsuit to challenge school segregation. And in some ways, we still have segregation in schools today. You'll see how you'll see the disparities that still exist. Even though you might have maybe 4 or 5 black kids, maybe 2 or 3 Mexican kids, the residual and the effects of it is still here in this country. Feel free to share this story. The fight to go to school. That says a lot. The fight to go to school. I am TB Wahid, Black Living Room Talk. I wish you peace, love, and light. Hotel.